I knew something was wrong the moment the key wouldn't turn. It was a cold Sunday morning in late January, the kind of cold that clings to the air like a breath never released. I had just come back from St. Yusa Hospital, still wearing the same jeans I'd had on for 4 days, still carrying the overnight bag I packed the moment James collapsed. In my left hand was a bouquet of roses and lilies from his coworkers, now wilted in the back seat of my car. My eyes were swollen, lips cracked from too many tears, and not enough sleep. 14 hours earlier, I had watched my husband die in the cardiac unit. I wasn't ready to face the silence waiting inside our home, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw instead. I stepped onto the porch and slid the key into the front door. It jammed. I pulled it out, tried again. Nothing. My chest tightened. I checked the spare, the one hidden behind the loose stone on the porch. Still no luck. It felt like the lock had forgotten me, or worse, was rejecting me. That's when I noticed the curtains. The white linen ones I'd hemmed by hand were gone. In their place, thick velvet panels in a loud floral print I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. I leaned in, squinting through the narrow slit between the curtain and the wall. Inside, the living room was cluttered with boxy cardboard towers stacked where there should have been open space. A pink velvet pillow sat on my reading chair. A floral teacup rested on the coffee table. And then, I saw her. Ava, my mother, wearing a navy cardigan and a smile that sent ice crawling up my spine. She was sipping tea. My tea from the wedding china James and I had saved for 3 years to afford. Across from her, casually folding throw blankets into a basket, was Jocelyn, James's younger sister. They were laughing, settling in, like I didn't exist, like James hadn't died just the night before. I knocked, no answer, knocked again, louder this time, my fists trembling, my throat raw. After what felt like forever, the door cracked open. Ava filled the frame, composed. Arms folded like she'd been rehearsing this moment for years. Olivia, she said, tilting her head, didn't expect you so soon. What's going on? I asked, my voice unsteady. Why can't I open the door? She leaned against the frame, perfectly poised. Because, dear, you don't live here anymore. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Excuse me. Ava's smile didn't falter. James paid for this house, my son, not you. No prenup, no kids, and no real contribution on your part. It's time this house returned to his real family. For a second, I thought the cold I felt was from the weather. It wasn't. It was coming from her. I'm his wife, I whispered. We bought this house together. I refinanced it when his business failed. Oh, please, Ava scoffed, waving a hand. You played house while he worked. Now that he's gone, your lease is up. Behind her, Jocelyn, 2 of my serving plates. You left the side door unlocked when you went to the hospital, she said with a smirk. We figured you wouldn't mind. My knees nearly gave out. I laughed, not out of humor, but that hollow, stunned kind of disbelief that hits when reality shatters too fast. What's so funny? Ava asked, her voice sharp. I steadied myself, wiped a tear, though I wasn't sure it came from sadness anymore. You're unpacking throw pillows and pouring tea in a house you think belongs to you, I said quietly. But you have no idea what you've just stepped into. Ava's smile faltered for just a moment. And that was all I needed. I turned and walked back to my car. My keys were useless now, but I had something far more valuable. Something Ava didn't know about yet. And when I was done, she'd wish she'd never touched a single cup in my kitchen. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, I sat on this same front porch, watching James run his hands through his hair, overwhelmed. It was January then, too colder, darker. His startup had collapsed the week before. The bank had frozen his business accounts. His credit was shot. I remember the way he couldn't even look at me when he said it. They might take the house, Olivia. James wasn't a weak man. But that day, I saw him cracked wide open. The same house Ava now claimed belonged to the real family. The next morning, I made a decision. Quietly, without telling James, I got dressed, drove to the credit union, and started the refinance paperwork. I moved the mortgage into my name, using the small nest egg I'd been saving since I left my interior design job 10 years earlier. I didn't tell anyone, not James, not my parents, and certainly not Ava. She would have seen it as proof that her son had failed. So I stayed silent. It took weeks. I picked up freelance gigs to make the payments. James never asked where the mortgage letters were going. He was too busy recovering, emotionally, physically. I kept the house afloat, fixed the faucet, budgeted groceries, painted the hallway. I held our home together with quiet, invisible threads. Ava, of course, never knew. She only visited on holidays, never stayed long. She hated the South, thought Savannah was too soft, too warm, too forgiving. I'd hear her voice echoing from the guest room. James, you were meant for more than this floral wallpaper and street jazz. And James would smile that tired smile and whisper to me in bed later, she just doesn't understand peace. I never wanted to confront her, not then, not now. I just wanted space, room to grieve, to be alone in the only place that still smelled like him. Instead, she changed the locks, and I sat in my car outside the house, heart pounding with something that had nothing to do with grief anymore. January air crept into my coat, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. It was like my body had forgotten how to react. How do you even begin to process losing your husband and your home in the same day? Eventually, I drove to a rundown motel just off Highway 205. The place reeked of bleach, mold, and something vaguely chemical. I used James's emergency credit card, the only one still active, on booked a room for 3 nights. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my bag. No clothes, just hospital papers, a book I never opened, and the last voicemail James left me the night before his heart gave out. I played it once, then again, then I shut my phone off. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept picturing Ava in my chair, Jocelyn eating off my plates, boxes of their things filling the hallway. They hadn't even let his body go cold before claiming the house. The next morning, Tuesday, I woke to the sound of church bells. St. Francis down the street rang them every hour. I sat up slowly, brushed the knots from my hair, and stared at the blank motel ceiling. My fingers ached from gripping the sheets. My throat burned. And then, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I picked up the phone and called the funeral home. Good morning. A kind voice answered. St. Matthew's Memorial. This is Margaret. Yes, I said, voice steadier than expected. This is Olivia Monroe. I need to update the guest list for James Monroe's service. A pause. Of course, Mrs. Monroe. What changes would you like to make? I didn't hesitate. Remove Ava Monroe and Jocelyn Monroe from the list. A longer pause. This time, understood. I hung up before she could ask why. It wasn't out of spite. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was a boundary. The first one I'd drawn in over a decade of swallowing my voice. And for the first time since James died, I felt something close to control. Tuesday afternoon, I returned to the house. Not through the front. I parked behind the hedges that lined our backyard, out of sight. No car in the driveway, no sign of Jocelyn. The side door off the laundry room had a latch James always meant to fix. I knew how to slip it open without a sound. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad, just foreign. Lavender air fresheners. I hated lavender. My framed photos were gone from the hallway. In their place, landscape prints I didn't recognize. A pang hit me when I noticed the throw pillows rearranged. James's side of the couch empty. No blanket, no coffee mug, no trace. I didn't have time to mourn. I moved fast. James's office sat tucked in the back of the house between the guest room and laundry. A small, windowless room, packed with wires, books, and the faint scent of his cologne. Ava hated that space. She called it a digital junkyard. That's why I figured she wouldn't touch it. I was right. It was exactly how he left it. Messy in that overly organized way only James understood. Stacks of papers, receipts, USB drives, labeled in his perfect all-caps handwriting. I stood in the doorway, letting the silence wash over me like armor. Then I got to work. Top drawer, freelance receipts. Second drawer, business cards, old flash drives, a sticky note reminding him to cancel a dentist appointment. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe just a memory, a signature, anything to tie me back to him and to this house. That's when I saw it. A slim black folder wedged between 2 instruction manuals. Across the front, in his unmistakable handwriting, post-nup, do not discard. I froze. We never signed a prenup. We married in our mid-30s, broke, but in love. James always joked paperwork ruined the romance. But a post-nup. I opened the folder slowly. 3 pages, legal letterhead, dated 3 weeks after our 2nd anniversary. I scanned 4 names, signatures, clauses, and there it was. In the event of the husband's death, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, are to be transferred wholly to Olivia Monroe. unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. There was no will. But this was binding. Tucked at the back was a folded sheet of notebook paper. His handwriting, slanted, casual, darker ink than usual. 4 lines. If you're reading this, something awful has happened. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep this safe. Ratch. My breath caught. The curve of the R, the way he signed just E, like we were passing notes in class again. My knees gave out. I had to sit down. I read it twice. Then again, and again. My heart ached with something too tangled to name. Grief, vindication, guilt, maybe even gratitude. James had known. Somewhere deep down, he knew Ava wouldn't stop. And despite all his flaws, he tried. He really tried to protect me. I slipped the folder into my coat and left through the back, just like I came in. That night, back at the motel, I still didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. Instead, I stayed up rereading the post-it until the words stopped blurring. By sunrise, I'd called Angela Flores, my old college roommate, now a real estate attorney. We scheduled a meeting, because now I had paperwork, and just enough anger to use it. Wednesday afternoon came gray and lifeless, the kind of day the sun doesn't even bother to show up for. I'd just come back from seeing Angela. She hadn't seen me in years, but pulled me into a hug like we'd spoken yesterday. She didn't ask how I was, just looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to make this right." I was halfway through a bowl of instant soup in the motel kitchenette when I heard it, a knock. 3 sharp raps, the kind of knock that carries entitlement. I peeked through the curtain. Ava, dressed in black like she'd walked out of a soap opera. Next to her a man in a gray suit, clipboard, wedding ring, lawyer. I didn't open the door. I stepped outside instead, coat zipped, folder in hand, and met them in the parking lot. The wind whipped Ava's scarf sideways. "Olivia," she said, with a thin smile. "This is Mr. Langley, our family attorney. We're here to discuss next steps regarding the house." "Next steps," I repeated. Voice calm. Ava nodded, like this was a routine property handoff, and not a takeover. "During a funeral week. Since James left no will," she said. "His estate, including the house, is subject to division among next of kin. As his mother and sister, we have legal rights. I'm his wife," I said, "his only legal spouse." Mr. Langley cleared his throat, already uneasy. "What Mrs. Monroe means is, without a will, probate law does allow for shared." "I'm so glad you're both here," I interrupted, steady and firm. "Saves me a trip to your office." I held up the black folder. Ava's smile twitched. "This is a notarized postnuptial agreement," I said. "Signed 3 years ago. 2 witnesses, legal letterhead. It transfers all shared assets to me, the spouse, in the event of James's death." Silence. Mr. Langley reached out. "May I review that document?" "No," I said, pulling it back. "You'll get a copy through proper channels. I've already retained counsel." Ava's expression cracked. "You're bluffing," she hissed. "Am I asked, taking a step back toward the door. "Because if I'm bluffing, you should feel confident enough to go back to your car and celebrate. But if I'm not, then what you've done here is trespassing, an unlawful entry. You touched something that was never yours." Mr. Langley stepped back from her, subtly. "You don't get to win this time," Ava said, her voice lower now, venom barely hidden. "You were never part of our family. You stole my son from us." I tilted my head. "He wasn't a trophy," I said. "He was a man, and I didn't steal him. You pushed him away the moment he stopped living by your rules." I didn't wait for a reply. I turned my back and walked inside, locking the door behind me. From the window, I watched them stand in silence for a few seconds. Then, Ava spun around, slipping into the passenger seat like a queen retreating from battle. The lawyer followed, awkward, flustered. They didn't knock again that night. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and opened James's letter. Again, my fingers traced the ink, wondering if he ever imagined how quickly she'd come from me, or how shameless she'd be. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he wrote it. I barely slept. The adrenaline made rest impossible. My hands twitched. My breath came in short bursts, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing, and the next move would be mine. By Friday morning, the motel room had absorbed my grief. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp coffee grounds and unopened envelopes. I was sitting at the small fold-out table, trying to focus on funeral arrangements, again music, eulogy, seating when I noticed it. An envelope, no stamp, no return, address, just slid under the door sometime in the night. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Inside was a neatly typed document from the Kadim County Probate Court. The letterhead was crisp, the ink fresh. My name was printed in bold, near the top. Olivia Monroe, respondent, my pulse spiked. To whom it may concern. This court has received a formal petition filed by Mrs. Ava Monroe, mother of the late James Monroe, challenging the validity of the property transfer and postnuptial agreement dated June 5, 3 years prior. The petitioner alleges that undue influence, mental distress, and coercion may have affected Mr. Monroe's decisions in the months leading up to his death. I stopped reading. She was accusing me of manipulating him, of controlling him while he was vulnerable, of using the man I loved to steal his house. I dropped the letter on the table like it burned my skin. The rage that rose in me was slow and hot, like molasses over fire, not explosive, not loud, just steady, just final. I picked up my phone and called Angela. I figured you'd call, she said before I could speak. She's saying I coerced him, I said flatly, that I forced him to sign the postnup. Angela's voice was calm. Too calm. That's not new. It's what people do when they don't have legal footing. They throw mud and hope something sticks. She wants to take everything, I whispered. Not just the house. She wants to rewrite who he was, who we were. She wants control, Angela corrected. This was never about money. I stared at the ceiling corner, feeling the cold motel air wrap around my ankles. I want to fight her, I said. Not just stop her, I want to destroy her. Angela paused. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, steel wrapped in velvet. Good, but we do this smart. You don't talk to her. You don't respond. Let me build this, one brick at a time. We hung up. I stared at the court letter for a long time. Then I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my suitcase. That afternoon, a text lit up my phone. A number I hadn't seen in over a year. James Harding, James's former business partner. Hey Olivia, I don't want to get involved, but Ava reached out. She asked about James's mental state during the last few months, wanted to know if I had emails, medical stuff, anything about confusion or memory lapses. I didn't give her anything, but she mentioned that one investor meeting. Remember, he came back a little off. I just thought you should know. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Of course I remembered. 3 months before James died, he came home from a client meeting pale, shaken, said he forgot where he parked. Forgot the name of the guy he just met. He blamed stress, insomnia, too much coffee. But Ava must have heard about it. She was building a case. If she convinced the court that James hadn't been of sound mind with only circumstantial evidence, she could unravel everything. Undue influence is hard to disprove, especially when it's paired with whispers, concerned relatives, and unanswered questions. That's when I remembered something James said, almost offhand, one night after dinner. I've got an appointment at St. Michael's next week. Neurology, just to rule stuff out. Probably nothing. I hadn't gone with him. He told me not to worry. I scrambled off the bed, yanked open my suitcase, and dumped the folder of documents onto the bedspread. I tore through everything: utility bills, mortgage papers, old birthday cards, even a dentist reminder. Then, tucked inside a pile of unopened mail from 3 months ago, I found it. A sealed envelope from St. Michael's Neurology Clinic. I opened it with trembling hands. Dear Mr. Monroe, following your recent cognitive assessment, we are pleased to inform you that your results fall within the normal range. No signs of early cognitive decline were detected. I read it 3 times before I finally exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding for over a week. I'd been holding it together, and now I had proof. Sunday morning, 1 week since James died. 5 days since Ava filed the petition. 72 hours since I found the neurologist's letter, the one that would change everything. The courthouse on Montgomery Street was cold, even in spring. Steel benches, marble floors, that sterile echo, shoes clicking, papers shuffling, whispered accusations. Angela met me on the steps, hair in a tight bun, folder in hand, eyes sharp, ready. Softly, she asked. I am, I said, and I was. For the first time in days, I felt grounded. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty. Ava sat in the front row, dressed in dramatic, black lace, her posture perfect, a tissue already clutched like a prop. Jocelyn sat beside her, head bowed, the perfect daughter in mourning. Beside them was Mr. Langley, the same man with the clipboard from the motel. I didn't look their way. Angela and I sat at the respondents' table. My hands trembled under the surface, but I kept my back straight. I wasn't here to beg. Was here to protect what James and I had built. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with silver glasses and tired eyes, called the session to order. Mr. Langley spoke first. His voice was calm, gentle, carefully designed to frame Ava as a concerned mother, not a bitter one. He spoke of James's sudden passing, of unanswered questions, of documents signed in emotionally vulnerable times. He didn't say coercion, but he let the word hang there like smoke. Ava cried, on cue. Then it was Angela's turn. She rose slowly, didn't perform, didn't raise her voice. She just laid down the facts, one by one, like cards at a poker table. The notarized postnup, the house deed in my name, the mortgage payments made from my account, and finally, the letter from St. Michael's Neurology, signed, dated, sealed. Angela handed it to the judge and said, only one sentence, this is dated 3 months before Mr. Monroe's death and confirms his full mental capacity. The room fell silent. Mr. Langley stammered, tried to pivot. Even so, Your Honor, we must consider the emotional dynamics. Do you have documentation? The judge asked, flatly. Medical records, testimony from a licensed physician, any evidence of diminished capacity? He faltered. No, Your Honor. Then I see no grounds, she said, already writing. The postnuptial agreement is legally binding. The deed is in Mrs. Monroe's name. This house legally belongs to her. Case dismissed. Just like that, the gavel came down, thunder in my ears. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile, I just exhaled, long, slow, silent, the kind of breath you don't know you're holding, until it's finally gone. Outside, the sky was deep blue. Birds chirped in the oak trees like nothing had happened. I didn't expect her to follow me, but she did. Ava caught up on the courthouse steps. Her heels hit the stone like gunshots. You may have won the house, she said, voice like glass, but you'll never erase me. I'm his mother. I turned slowly. You already erased yourself, I said. She blinked. You erased yourself when you tried to rewrite who he was, when you broke into our home, stole his things, lied under oath. James knew who you were, Ava. That's why he wrote the letter. That's why he signed the postnup. Her face cracked. Not much, but enough. I leaned in. And if you come near me again, I won't need a courtroom to protect myself. The restraining order's already filed. She stepped back. You can't keep me from his funeral, she hissed. I already did, I replied, calm. I called the funeral home the morning after you changed the locks. Your name's off the list. If you show up, they'll escort you out. Her mouth twisted. You vindictive little. I'm not vindictive, I said, cutting her off. I'm free. And I walked away, head high, not once looking back. The chapel smelled like lilies and cedar polish. It was Tuesday, 1 week exactly since James's heart gave out. The service was set for noon, but by 11:15, the pews were filling. Friends, neighbors, a few old clients. Some drove in from Atlanta, others from Charleston. Many hadn't seen us in years. I'm so sorry, they whispered, hugging me. He loved you so much. He always talked about your garden plans. He said you were the only calm he ever knew. I nodded, smiled softly, swallowed the words I couldn't afford to say. Angela arrived just before 11:40. She sat near the front, not as my attorney today, but as a friend. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Musicians tuned quietly in the corner. The minister flipped through notes. James's urn sat on a small table, wrapped in blue velvet, his favorite color. I chose it myself. And then I saw them, 2 silhouettes, slipping into the back pew. Barely noticeable if you weren't looking, but I was Ava Jocelyn, dressed in black, perfectly coordinated, hair pinned, veils, subtle, morning clothes, theater costumes, masks. They weren't on the guest list. The funeral home had promised they'd be stopped, but someone must have looked away. Now, there they were, pretending to belong. I stood frozen, not with grief, but fury. I had already buried James once. I would not let them dig him up for show. Angela turned slightly. Want me to handle it? She whispered. I shook my head. No, I'll do it. I walked slowly down the aisle. heels echoing in the hush. Every head turned. The music paused. Even the minister stepped aside, sensing something sacred was in motion. At the back, Ava looked up, her smile, small. Jocelyn's eyes flickered away. "You're not supposed to be here," I said quietly. "We're not leaving," Ava replied, proud I gave birth to him. "Then you should have respected his wishes. I'm his mother, and I'm his wife. The only one he chose." She straightened, defiant. "You can't stop me from mourning my own son." "Not mourning," I said. "Performing." She blinked. "I will walk out right now," I added, "and I'll take the minister with me. We'll finish the service in a park, a parking lot, a kitchen table. I don't care. But you won't sit here and pretend you didn't try to erase him. You don't get to use his death for dignity you never earned." For a second, no one moved. Then Jocelyn broke the silence. "Mom," she said softly, not meeting anyone's eyes. "Let's go." Ava turned to her, stunned. "We're not wanted here," Jocelyn added. "Let's stop pretending." She stood, slowly, and Ava followed. No scene, no shouting, just two pairs of heels walking away, and the soft click of the chapel door behind them. When I turned back, the entire room exhaled. I walked to the front. The music resumed. The minister nodded, and with steady hands, I stood before James's urn and said goodbye. Not surrounded by liars, not interrupted by venom, but wrapped in silence, in truth, and in the love of people who actually knew who he was. For the first time since he died, I felt peace. The day after the funeral, the house was silent. Not the comforting kind, the kind that watches you, waits for you to break. I stood at the kitchen sink in James's old sweatshirt, hands around a chipped mug. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. I hadn't moved. Outside, the garden was bare. Just turned soil. The start of what might grow. Someday, maybe. If I kept going. I turned slowly, half expecting to see James at the table, humming off-key, legs kicked up, like always. But the chair was empty. The mug was his. The silence was mine. I had survived the funeral, survived court, but I still waited for the other shoe to drop. So when I looked out the front window and saw Ava's car parked across the street, I wasn't surprised. It was early, barely 8 a.m. The engine was off. Windows rolled down halfway. A slow curl of cigarette smoke drifted into the air. She didn't knock, didn't approach, just watched. I didn't move either. I didn't call Angela, didn't take a picture. I just picked up my coffee, walked calmly out onto the front porch, barefoot, hair undone, mug in hand. I met her eyes. She flicked her cigarette out the window. The car rumbled to life. And then she drove away. No threats, no shouting, no final word. Just gone. But it wasn't surrender. It was retreat. Her way of saying, "I still exist." I went back inside, locked the door, and exhaled. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear. Not anymore. But from something quieter, heavier, like my body was still bracing for impact, even after the danger passed. For 3 days, she didn't come back. I spent them cleaning, sorting James's files, touching every drawer and surface he once used. The process was brutal. Each receipt, a memory, each pen, with his bite mark a tiny stab to the heart. On the third afternoon, I found his old gardening notebook, the one filled with doodles, diagrams, dreams of a yard full of life. He had drawn marigolds, labeled every seed, even taped a packet with a note for Ratch one day. "When you're ready." I wasn't ready, but I went outside anyway. I dug where he marked, turned the soil with bare hands, planted every seed, watered them gently, sat beside them as the sun went down, and, for a moment, I forgot the lawsuits, the lies, the funeral seating chart. I remembered his hands, his laugh, his stupid gardening hat. And when I came back to the front door that night, I found the envelope. No stamp, no handwriting. Just 6 words, printed in bold block letters on a plain white sheet. "This house will always be mine." I stared at it for a long time. Then, I laughed. Not bitterly, not out of rage. Just lightly, with something that almost sounded like peace, like a release. There was nothing left, no claim, no proof, no presence. Just 6 words from a woman who had already been cut out of my will, my wedding, my life. I took the paper outside, walked to the garden, dug a small hole beneath James's marigold bed, buried the letter deep, and covered it with soil and fertilizer. I thought maybe something good could grow from it. Brushing the dirt from my hands, I whispered, "You don't haunt me anymore." Then I went inside and made cinnamon tea. James always said grief needed something sweet. Spring came early that year. The air smelled like turned earth and lemon blossoms. The garden, once just bare dirt and scribbled dreams in James's old notebook, began to stir. Tiny shoots broke through the soil. Small, stubborn green things reaching for the sun. Every morning, I watched them with coffee in hand, wrapped in James's flannel shirt. No expectations. No pretending. Just breath. I never heard from Ava again. No letters. No calls. No unfamiliar car parked across the street. Whether it was the restraining order, or the garden, or the truth finally settling in, I didn't know, and I didn't care. She became a shadow in the rearview mirror, a past tense. The house shifted with the season. I painted the guest room soft sage green, took down the photos she'd replaced, and hung new ones. Me and James at the lake, our dog Max, before he passed, sunsets we chased instead of arguments we avoided. I cleared out the office, but left one drawer untouched, his drawer, not as a shrine, but as a promise. Some nights, I'd sit by the window and speak to him out loud, about the garden, about the marigolds, about how, somehow, I was still here. I didn't expect answers, but sometimes, when the wind shifted just right, I didn't feel so alone. Eventually, I went back to work, not from desperation, but from choice. I reopened my interior design business, one client at a time. A widow repainting her kitchen to feel less like his space. A retired couple building a sunroom for orchids. A young woman who'd just left her fiancé and wanted her apartment to finally feel like hers. They didn't know my story, but I saw pieces of myself in every one of them. I designed like I was planting, with care, with intention, with quiet strength. One Saturday morning, while trimming rosemary in the kitchen window, I noticed an envelope in the mail. No threat, just a check, a refund from the funeral home. The card inside read, "You handled everything with grace." James would have been proud. No signature, no return address, but I knew the handwriting. Jocelyn's. I tucked the note into the back of James's garden journal. It didn't erase the past. It didn't fix anything. But it was something. And sometimes, something is enough. By early summer, the marigolds bloomed, bright bursts of gold and orange like tiny suns. I sat beside them barefoot, dirt under my nails, sun warming my cheeks, and whispered the final thing I needed to say. I didn't win because I took something from you, Ava. I won because I refused to let you take me. The wind rustled the leaves. The porch chimes sang a crooked little song, and somewhere in that warm, shifting air, I could almost hear James laugh. They say grief fades with time. It doesn't. It shifts. It softens around the edges. But it never leaves. It folds itself into your routine, into the tea you make, in the morning, into the silence between songs on the radio, into the way your hand still reaches for someone who's not there. James is gone. That's the truth. But so is the woman I used to be. The woman who kept peace at any cost, who let her mother-in-law speak over her, erase her, claim what wasn't hers, who smiled through long dinners while bleeding invisibly inside, who shrank so someone else could feel big. That woman died the day James did. And in her place, I planted something else. Not revenge, not bitterness, just roots. The garden is wild now, not messy, not chaotic, just alive. Marigolds and mint, rosemary, and lavender. I added a bench near the back fence, under the old maple tree James once wanted to hang wind chimes from. I sit there some evenings, not to cry, but to remember who I've become, because the sweetest revenge isn't courtroom victory, it's the quiet click of a door locking from the inside. It's drinking coffee in your own kitchen without fear. It's breathing deeply in a space that no longer smells like shame. I don't tell everyone what happened. Not always, but when someone asks, some widow at church, some woman at the market, whose hands shake while she writes a check, I tell them the truth, in pieces. I say, you don't have to be polite to someone who erases you. You're not selfish for locking your doors. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. And then I tell them about the garden, how it bloomed from a battlefield, how it feeds me, calms me, holds me. How sometimes something small and beautiful can grow right where you thought your world had ended. That's not a metaphor. That's survival. And now, months later, I don't walk the same. I don't apologize for taking up space. I don't explain why I changed the locks. I don't flinch when I pass the road where her car once sat, silent and waiting. Because she's not waiting anymore. She lost. And I'm not angry. I'm just done. This house is mine. This life is mine. This voice, this calm, steady, stubborn voice is finally mine, and I will never hand it over again.